Aloha! I'm Dan Chun, co-founder and president of Hawaiian Islands Ministries, known also as HIM, or even shorter as HIM. And welcome to the HIM podcast, where we talk to some of the great thought leaders around the world. And we talk a lot about leadership. We talk about helping people out. We talk about faith. We talk about hope. And we have with us today Guy Kawasaki. And Guy, I've known since the 1980s when he was working for Apple as an evangelist, which we'll explain later because he's not a missionary passing out tracts. And it was the time when the Macintosh was invented, and soon after that, John Scully was fired. And I got to know him back then. And by God's grace, to show there is a God, I didn't know what I was doing, believed in Apple, bought some stock at $7.50. And that's good news. The bad news is I only bought $5,000 worth because I was a poor pastor. And so that's a bummer. I would tithe a lot
and
more.
now that's worth $10 million.
I know. I really screwed up. But anyway, we met while we were going...
You screwed up. I quit Apple twice and turned Steve down for another job, so...
Oh, my goodness. So welcome, Guy Kawasaki, to the show of winners and losers. I won't say which one he is. He's probably a winner. Yeah, we met when we were going to the same church in the Bay Area, where I was a pastor at that time. And I should say he's a local boy, grew up here in Honolulu, went to that school called Iolani, which means...
Oh, that's the school Barack Obama couldn't get in.
Oh, jeez. That's the school that the Omidyars, I think, turned down to have their kids sent to Punahou, I think. But as you can see, for those of you from the mainland, Iolani and my school, Punahou, have this deep competition, and I would say jealousy from Iolani's side.
It's kind of like USC versus Stanford, and Punahou is USC, and Iolani is Stanford.
So that's another ribbing from Guy, because I did go to USC Film School, and Guy went to that B school called Stanford. And so it's only through Christ, through God, that we can be unified today and still be friends after all these years.
It merely took God.
Yes. Of course, I worry about Guy's waning faith, but we'll talk about that later. But anyway, just so you know, quick bio on him.
My faith isn't waning. It's refocusing.
Okay, that's good. We're going to talk about how to be a remarkable follower of Jesus later. So Guy is the chief evangelist of Canva. He was an evangelist for Apple, and we'll explain that term later. He's the author of this book that just came out called Think Remarkable. And he's also, he's been a brand ambassador for Mercedes-Benz, which I'm very jealous. I'm assuming he gets a Mercedes for doing that. And he's a trustee of the Wikimedia Foundation, which I'm going to ask him for millions of dollars later. He's written tons of books, 12 books at least. Including
16, but who's counting?
Including The Art of the Start.
Where did you get this old bio?
I don't know. I think I got it from you.
No, you didn't.
I did. You sent this to me. I see the date. Here it is. September 25, 11:10 a.m. from Guy Kawasaki. You sent this to me. Isn't that amazing?
No way. I have 16 books. I am no longer a Wikimedia trustee, and I'm no longer a Mercedes-Benz ambassador.
All right.
And you got that from
email.
me.
Yeah, check that email. And you said more than you need, but you gave it to me. So as you can see, we're already fighting about his bio, which is highly questionable anyway. But I brought him here because he's actually quite a remarkable person. So first of all, explain for our faith-based community, what does it mean you're an Apple evangelist or you're evangelist for Canva? Because they're going to think you're walking down the hallways and passing out tracts.
Well, first of all, let's not confuse evangelism with evangelicalism.
Okay.
Just get that on the table.
Okay.
So at least as I understand it, evangelism comes from a Greek term meaning bringing the good news. And so you could make the case that Jesus Christ brought the good news of eternal life. Guy Kawasaki didn't have that good a product. I evangelized Macintosh, so I brought the good news of Macintosh, how it would make people more creative and productive. Today, I'm the chief evangelist of Canva, And Canva has democratized design. So the good news of Canva is that anybody can make beautiful designs. So what an evangelist does is bring good news. And what separates evangelism from, let's say, typical sales and marketing is evangelists have the other person's best interests at heart, not just his or her own best interests.
Great. And as we're going to talk more in this show, that his book about Think Remarkable is not just about making tons of money or being highly successful, but really how to make other people's lives better and make the world a better place. And by the way, he has a phenomenal podcast called is it Remarkable People, right? Or is it just Remarkable? I don't know what it's called. It's Remarkable something. Remarkable good stuff. But it's really one of my favorite podcasts. And he brings some of the coolest, most intriguing guests on his show. So I highly recommend you check that out. In fact, name some of the most well-known guests you've had.
Well, let's start in Hawaii. So from Hawaii, we had Roy Yamaguchi, Jerry Lopez, so that's food and surfing, Jane Goodall, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Angela Duckworth, Carol Dweck, Mark Laberton, let's see, Stacey Abrams, Margaret Atwood, Christy Yamaguchi, Brandy Chastain, Ronnie Lott. I could just go on
we got
and
some
on.
jocks there.
I mean,
Jocks
I've had
and jockettes.
250 remarkable people.
Did you have Biden on your show?
No, I
saw him in your list
I haven't
of people.
gotten to Biden.
Well, I thought his name was listed in your book of guests you had. For,
no.
Better check that
if
out.
I could have Joe Biden, I would take him in a second, and I wish I could get Joe Biden and Michelle Obama. That would be pretty much my top two choices.
Okay, there you go for my progressive brother here. So that's a phenomenal. So I really enjoy that podcast. I enjoyed the book. And so let's talk about the book first, and then I want to delve into some other things. Basically, to make it simple, you talk about 3 G's of remarkable people: growth, grit, and grace. And I want to go deeper on each one. Let's start off with growth. How do you want to define that? And then I'm going to hit you with some questions.
Well, my growth section is based on the remarkable work of remarkable Carol Dweck. She's a Stanford professor. She wrote a book called Mindset. And this is required reading. It basically explains that there's 2 kinds of people, that there are people who have a growth mindset, who believe they can try new things, do new things, try new products, services. And there's a fixed mindset, and those people do not believe that. They believe that they are what they are. They can be no more. They also believe they can be no less, which is damaging. So that's the growth mindset. And in my book, I use 2 examples from athletics, which is I took up ice hockey at the age of 44. And let's just say taking up ice hockey at 44 is about, 40 years too late. And, I grew up in Kalihi Valley, not a lot of pond hockey in Kalihi Valley. I tell people that, I grew up in Hawaii. I never skated till I was 44. And the closest thing that we have to pond hockey in Hawaii is shave ice. And that's just not a sport. And I also took up surfing at the age of 60, which is 55 years too late. So I think those 2 are tangible examples of taking up something very late in life, hockey and surfing. And then I took up podcasting at 65. So I'm a late bloomer, but better late than never.
Well, late bloomer, but you're also saying you're a lifelong learner, right?
Yeah, that's the other way of looking at it, yes.
Right. And I also say, when I read your book, I felt there was a theme of humility that revealed itself in a variety of ways. And what you're just saying is to be humble enough to try new things, even though you might be bad at hockey with 0 experience. Maybe kind of low, though, because which means dumb if you're from the mainland. It's about concussions. Weren't you worried about concussions? And didn't you tell me after you saw some movie about a boxer?
Yeah, basically, the Hawaii term would be make ass. So if you have the growth mindset and you take up hockey or podcasting or surfing late in life, you got to be willing to make ass. In other words, make an ass of yourself. And that's not something that I have had a problem with. I don't hesitate to do that at all.
Which is intriguing, Guy, because, you speak at a lot of places. I even heard one of your podcasts. It's good to have theme music when you walk up. I would think someone like you would be worried about making ass.
Well, yeah, this is a subtle point. Like, of course I worry about making ass. I don't set out and say, God, Guy, if only you could make ass, your life would be better. I am worried about making ass. And being worried about making ass helps prevent you from making ass. And if you're not worried about it, in other words, you're the emperor with no clothes, and you're not worried about making ass, that's pretty much a guarantee of making ass. So, you got to show that you don't want to do that, but you still go ahead.
And there you have it. This is probably the only Christian podcast show in the nation where we can talk about making ass. So hang in there, national audience and local audience. So one thing that struck me that was really kind of a drop the mic time, when you talk about Margaret O'Mara, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, where she said that mentors were a big reason for the success of tech entrepreneurs who started out in Silicon Valley, which is where our church was when we first met. So I was just stunned by that. How are they multipliers? How are they, in a sense, I would call them disciplers if I were to use a church term.
I mean, one of the greatest examples, of course, is Apple. So Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had a mentor named Mike Markkula. And, it seems like, well, you could make the case that Larry Ellison was Mark Benioff's mentor, the founder of Salesforce. And you just go down the line, and many, many tech executives, tech founders have had a mentor. And I think that's generally true in life, not just tech startups. We talked about the growth phase of my book. The next phase is grit, because if you have a growth mindset, you got to be willing to make ass, and you got to keep persevering when things are going bad. So that's grit. And then the third phase is grace. And what I noticed after interviewing all these people is that many of them, if not all of them, they want to pay back society. They want to be remembered for how they made the world a better place, not how they bought buildings or bought airplanes or, exposed plagiarism in university presidents. They have a much higher road that they're traveling on.
And it's amazing, again, to me, the theme of humility, that somebody would even seek a mentor. So how does one find a mentor? I mean, if that's so dramatic, makes a dramatic difference, how does one find a mentor?
Well, let me tell you how you should not find a mentor. So many people, they want the mentor to just be window dressing, right? They want to say, oh, Guy Kawasaki is my mentor. Dan Chun is my mentor. Elon Musk is my mentor. God help you. Bill Gates is my mentor. And they just want to drop the name because they want window dressing. And that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. What you need to do is you need to figure out a mentor who truly, truly can help you because of industry knowledge or because of management knowledge. So that's the thing. And then the next thing is that people think, oh my God, Bill Gates is so busy. There's no way he would mentor me. I would make the case that you should put those fears aside and just ask, because everybody ask, A-S-K, not A-S-S. Just ask, because most people are thinking, my God, Bill Gates is too busy, Guy Kawasaki is too busy, Dan Chun is too busy. No sense even asking them. And if everybody thinks that, guess what? We're not that busy. So you should ask. And then when you do ask, you got to demonstrate in the first minute that there's a very good reason why you're asking that specific person, right? So if you're going to ask Bill Gates to mentor you, you don't tell him that you're starting a biotech company, because what does Bill Gates know about biotech, right? And if you ask Guy Kawasaki to mentor you, you don't say, well, I need spiritual guidance, Guy. Will you be my mentor? Because what do I know about spiritual guidance? So you got to impress the mentor that, oh my God, this person really understands the value I can add. This person has done his homework. This person is prepared. And then you just have to ask.
And I would say, and when the person does, quote unquote, mentor you and give you advice, try to listen to it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, why else would you ask, right? I mean, I think the people who don't listen to their mentors are the people who wanted window dressing. Right? If you want window dressing, you just want the guy to agree with you or the gal to agree with you. But if you really wanted value, you actually want, pardon if I get this history of Catholicism wrong, but I have heard that the term devil's advocate is because in the Catholic Church, when someone is, I don't know if the right word is, nominated to be a saint, there's an office in the Vatican, and their job is to figure out every reason why that person shouldn't be a saint, and they are to be the devil's advocate and actually play the role of telling the other people why you're wrong about making this person a saint. So I hope I got that right, because it's very, very powerful story. And so what you want in a mentor is a devil's advocate who has the knowledge and ability and courage and patience to tell you when you are wrong.
Yeah, well done. Well done. And I think you are correct. And it is interesting. I think some people have asked me to be their mentor. When I say, hey, here's how you can improve on your preaching, let's say, then they don't want to hear it anymore. And it's actually, I'm trying to make the person better.
Well, what do they want you to mentor about?
I know, it's pretty strange. And so that's great. I was also touched by Ellen, again, I don't know how to pronounce these names. I'm reading them. Langer? Is it Ellen?
The Harvard professor.
Yeah, it's a Harvard professor. And it's interesting, if she were mentoring somebody, she says you should make careful decisions, but all the variables anticipated and unanticipated make perfect decisions an illusion. I thought that was profound. So take your best shot, she says, on making your decision right, and don't look back.
It is absolutely profound, and it's one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my interviews. And basically she's saying that, especially today with AI and big data, we spend so much time trying to make this perfect scientific decision, and we think that if you make the perfect decision, then everything else is easy. And I would make the case that first of all, it's impossible to make the perfect decision because you cannot consider all the variables. I mean, imagine if you made a perfect decision on February 1st, 2020. On March 1st, 2020, your perfect decision is out the window, right? And pandemic starts. And so what she's saying is, yes, you take your best shot, you make an intelligent decision, but after that, you focus on not making the right decision, but making the decision right. And oh my God, that is so powerful. It's actually liberating.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people in their business, in their ministry, in their nonprofit, they're so scared of risking. Like we may do something wrong or it may fail, not realizing even in the failure, they've learned a lot and they can make the product or the ministry even better. You mentioned in your book, and since we met during the Macintosh days, how Apple intended Macintosh to become several things, and then it didn't become that, as IBM PC was really taking over the market then, right? They wanted to be a spreadsheet, a word processing, a database computer, but they struck out, you said.
It wasn't to be, and luckily, very luckily, there was a little acorn named Paul Brainerd, and Paul Brainerd became a giant oak tree called Aldous, and Aldous created Aldous PageMaker, and PageMaker created a forest called desktop publishing, and desktop publishing saved Apple. So if it wasn't for that little unintended acorn called Aldous PageMaker, I don't think there would be Apple today.
So, Guy, when your Apple evangelism days, were you the one who convinced Apple to partner with Aldous?
Ah,
Or was that before your time?
I cannot take credit for that. I believe that he had a background in, the traditional layout and printing industry. And he saw the WYSIWYGness of Macintosh and figured out this is a much better way to lay out pages than using our typesetting codes and stuff. But listen, we had a definite attitude that I stole from Chairman Mao, which is let 100 flowers blossom. And what that means is that, yeah, you may think you want Macintosh to be a spreadsheet, database, or word processor, but you should let 100 flowers blossom because you just do not know which seed is going to take root and bloom. And if you knew, then yeah, I guess you could say, I'm only going to focus on these 5 companies because these 5 companies are going to produce the 5 killer apps that matter. But the point is, you have to work with about 2,000 companies to find 5 that produce a killer app. And you have no way of knowing in advance. And I could almost make the case that the least likely people to succeed are the ones who are going to succeed. And the most likely people will be the most disappointing.
Wow. And, I thinking again about Apple, and earlier I just said how I kind of blew it in not buying tons more Apple stock at an early time. You mentioned in the book Ronald Wayne, who 2 weeks after working with the 2 Steves that started Apple, he gave away, or he sold all his stock, 10% of his share, for $800. That was very funny. Made me feel better.
Listen, there are hundreds of stories like that.
Really?
Right? And there's an important lesson here. And the important lesson is whenever you hear a story like that, you always ask yourself, what's missing? So you hear the story of this guy who sold all his Apple stock for $800, which would probably be worth, $8 billion today. And you think, oh my God, you should never sell your Apple stock, or you should never sell a startup stock. You should stick with it to the end. But you need to ask what's missing. So for every story like that, there are thousands of stories of people who had stock and kept it, and the company went broke and they had nothing but paper, right? So you only hear about the exception. You got to ask, well, what percentage? 99.99999% of companies, if you kept the stock, it would be worth nothing. And so don't pay attention to that. Only one. And as just like me telling you that I quit Apple twice and I turned Steve Jobs down for a 3rd job. Well, so the lesson is there. What? Never quit a company. Well, I can tell you that there are many stories. Ask what's missing. How many stories are there of people who left a comfy job and did something better? Mm-hmm. I bet you there's more. Right? So you got to ask what's missing when you hear stories.
Yeah. See, your next book is What Happened to Ronald Wayne. So, okay, I want to move on to grit, which I really like, and I'm really looking forward to talking about grace. So grit is, you said, activating your aspirations, right? Embrace the grit mindset. And I love you started getting into the whole definition of ikigai. And so can you explain what that is? And then I want to go deeper on that.
Okay. So in this podcast, can I use the S word that refers to the product of bowel movements or not?
Probably not. So just say...
How about if I use the word for a type of Japanese mushroom?
Shiitake mushroom? Sure.
Okay.
Or say crud. How about crud or something? I don't know. I'm going to get cards and letters on this podcast. I'm going to get cards and letters. Okay, here we go. Or emails and text.
Listen, I learned a very valuable lesson that as long as people are complaining, they still want to do business. It's when they stop complaining, that's when you should worry.
Okay. Actually, I go to a church right now. They're doing a series called Leader Shift. And they always have to be careful when they say it really fast. And they talk about how shifts happen. And I go, oh my gosh, they got to be so careful. Okay, go ahead. I'll get ready for the texts and emails. Here we go.
All
He's
right,
an Iolani grad. You know, I can't help this guy.
It's Ikigai, not Ikigui, just to point that out. Ikigai is this Japanese concept of this meaning of your life, the reason why you get up enthusiastically in the morning. In a positive sense, it's your obsession, it's your passion. And, you know, when people cite examples of Ikigai, they often use the people who are living treasures in Japan, right? So the guy who's like 90 years old and he's making the best kitchen knives in Japan, and he goes up to the mountain and he digs out the ore. He takes the ore back, and then he forms this steel, and then he pounds it 2,000 times, and then he sharpens it for a year, and then he builds this handle out of special oak that came from, you know, some part of Hokkaido or something, and he makes these best knives, and that's his life. He wants to make the best knife. And that is a good example. Like Ikigai for me is podcasting. And I think, you know, one thing that I think that people have misinterpreted about Ikigai, and it's because of Western interpretation and Western values. Now, I don't want to overplay my Asianness, because it's not like I can tell you, oh, yeah, I studied at the feet of Buddhist monks for 50 years, so I truly know what Ikigai is. Okay, but when you hear Ikigai explained, you often hear that it is the intersection of what you love to do, what you're good at doing, and what you can make money at, right? And if you think, oh, so you're good at making kitchen knives, you can make money selling those knives, and you love making those knives, that's your Ikigai. I think that is giving insufficient credit to the power of Ikigai. I would make the case that you know you have found your Ikigai when you're not that good at something yet. You cannot make money at it, and you love it. That's the true test. I mean, if you're really good at investment banking and you can make a lot of money at investment banking and you love being an investment banker, I still don't think that might be your Ikigai. That might just be a way to, you know, sell your soul. So like another Ikigai of mine is surfing, and I can tell you something about surfing. Let's use that theoretical Venn diagram. So Guy, how good are you at surfing? Mediocre. How good will you ever be? Mediocre. Will you ever make money surfing? Never. But do you love surfing? Yes. I surf every day. I would say that Guy, you know, that means surfing is your Ikigai. And there's an author named Mark Manson, and he wrote a book that I cannot say on this podcast. It's The Subtle Art of Giving a You-Know-What. And he told me in my interview with him, he said, you know what, you know you have found your Ikigai or your passion in life when it involves shiitake sandwiches that everybody think is a shiitake sandwich, but you still love the shiitake sandwich. So if you're a podcaster, the shiitake sandwich for podcasting is you got to do a lot of editing. You got to do a lot of prep in order to have a good podcast. And that is really shiitake sandwiches. But if you love the shiitake sandwiches, then you love podcasting, and that's your Ikigai.
And that really resonated with me, but it made me also think there are certain people, maybe certain generations, that get repelled with this thinking, because you were saying that Ikigai, if you want to be remarkable and make a difference, you may be facing an unbalanced life and years of toil and sacrifice. So I think of Ikigai versus life-work balance. And for some generations of people or individuals, life-work balance is what it's all about. So would you say that's inoculating them against Ikigai?
I have a two-word response for you. basically tough shiitake. I mean, I'm telling you that if you want to be remarkable, you need to do remarkable things. You need to make the world a better place. And making the world a better place is not easy. So if you're trying to say, I want work-life balance, I think that is a vastly overrated concept. Now, I would say that at the end of your life, if you can say, I had work-life balance, if there was some magical way you could add up the hours working versus living, and it came out 50-50, God bless you, you pulled off work-life balance. But at any given moment of your life, to think that you're going to have 50-50 blend, you are hallucinating. And with a broad brush, I'll tell you that the first third of your life, you're going to be underpaid and overworked. Just get that through your head. The second third of your life, you're going to be overpaid and underworked. I just finished that phase. And the last phase of your life is when you want to pay it back. And if you can have a life like that, at the end of your life, you can say, I had work-life balance overall.
That's gold. That's gold. But I can hear some young adults in my life saying, thank you, boomer. Right?
Well,
because that's an older generation work ethic, right?
You can, I guess so, but I mean, what? You want me to lie to you? You want me to tell you that, yes, you can have work-life balance. Yes, you can be remarkable. Call up your company. Tell them you're not coming in anymore. And you're going to commute from Bali. And from Bali, you're going to sign in for your team meetings once a week for 2 hours because I have work-life balance. I live in Bali and I'm working. And that's my lifestyle. And I want more responsibility, more compensation, more glory, more opportunity. Good luck with that.
Man, I hope we have a lot of people listening to this podcast, man. This is platinum. This is good stuff.
That's why they're not going to buy my book. They're going to say, that's the guy who said, I got to work hard. And that's, what can I tell you?
Yeah. But you're also saying, if you want to live a remarkable life, not a mediocre life, if you want to lead a remarkable life, and as we'll get to later when we get to grace, and really make the world a better place, you're going to have to bust your buns.
Well, I cannot, I've interviewed 250 remarkable people. I cannot think of one person who said, Guy, I achieve work-life balance in every point of my life.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, as my mother once told me, if 250 people tell you you're drunk, you catch a cab. You don't argue that 250 people are wrong.
Right, right. Well, and I think, for some people, they do look at marriages that have gone sour, right? Or people are suffering from burnout. So that's part of their research and their data, right? But my question is, how do we get people, whether old or young, to get to that passion of ikigai? Or do you feel it's more caught than taught?
Well, I have another thing that, young people might recoil at, which is, I think that when you set off to quote unquote find your passion, you're doing yourself a disservice because it implies that passion is something that's like instant. You fall in love, you found your passion and you love it and you're going to dedicate your life to it and, life is great. I think that is much too high a test to apply. I think what happens in life is you see a lot of things that are interesting, not passion, interests. And things are interesting. Podcasting is interesting. Surfing is interesting. Theology might be interesting. Being a pastor might be interesting. Being an elder might be interesting. Being a programmer might be interesting. Making video might be interesting. So these lots of passions flow in and, a lot of interests flow in and out of your life. And if you have the growth mindset, you will try a few. And if you have the grit mindset, you will keep at it until you make it into something great. But the way to go through life is to do a lot of sampling. And by doing a lot of sampling, it's much more likely you're going to find your ikigai. And You know, I think that's a disservice we're doing in our educational system. You know, when tiger moms and tiger dads say, you know, for crying out loud, you're a junior in high school, you haven't found your passion yet. I mean, you should have found your passion. How come you haven't started a not-for-profit in Africa? How come you haven't gone on a mission around the world? How come you haven't, you know, won a MacArthur Fellowship? You're already 18 years old. What are you going to put on your college essay if you don't have your passion at 18? And if a tiger mom or tiger dad is listening to this and disagreeing with me, I say, tough shiitake.
Or as we say in ministry, rough rabbits. That's the title of your next book. Well, you know, Ikigai.
Somebody's going to say, what was Dan's latest episode about? And I'm going to say, I don't know. They talked a lot about mushrooms. I don't know what they was doing.
Well, I would have to clearly say for me, I mean, Ikigai would be my ministry. I mean, that's why I work so hard full-time as a pastor. And then I'm also running for the last 40 years Hawaiian Islands Ministries to kind of broaden it to make the world a better place and bring in people like you and speakers from all around the world. And it's long hours, you know, it's like 60, 70 hours a week. So I really get it. Just closing out this. Oh, go ahead.
So you haven't achieved work-life balance, Dan.
But by God's grace, I don't know how this happened, Guy, and I really mean by God's grace, and we'll talk about grace later, is that I've never burned out, but I've worked really, really hard. Now, there may be episodic times where I'm really down when I worked with a lot of PTSD veterans, and that was very sad for me, and I was probably too empathetic at that point. Anyway, so just to wrap it up, which, again, this section spoke to me on rejection. I call it the rejection section. That having grit means you have to get through rejection. You know, I'm thinking of like J.K. Rowling being turned down so many times, and before Harry Potter got produced, or Sylvester Stallone with Rocky got turned down many times, or Frank Herbert got turned down many times, who wrote Dune.
I got rejected by Stanford Business School. So.
And you went to Iolani. And then you talk about Melanie Perkins, the CEO of Canva. So can you tell that story? Because talk about rejection.
Melanie Perkins, CEO and founder of Canva, she tried to raise money for 2 years, and she was rejected 300 times. 300 times.
That's a huge number.
You know, that. I bet she didn't have work-life balance when she was asking for money 300 times. And so, you know, again, though, I caution you that when you hear a story like that, J.K. Rowling rejected, Sylvester Stallone rejected, Michael Jordan got cut as a sophomore from his basketball team, you know, Guy Kawasaki didn't get into Stanford Business School, and, you know, all those things. That I think you can use that as examples in your head that, oh my God, you know, this is not the end of the world. But I don't want people to conclude this, oh, it's a good thing that I got rejected. You know, you should try to avoid rejection and failure as much as you can. But if you fail or you are rejected, then at least you should learn from that to make rejection and failure less likely in the future. Because in my mind, there's only two kind of states, right? You're either succeeding or you're learning. There is no failure.
Yeah, and I think the other subtle lesson is maybe your product is bad. You know, or they're saying you really need to rewrite the first chapter, then rewrite it. Or your
that's
proposal.
Called Occam's razor, right? You know what Occam's razor is?
No.
Occam's razor is this concept that when you have a problem like that, and, you know, there are many solutions that, you know, no, it's the economy, that it's lack of government subsidy, it's the lack of the tax code, or, you know, it's like Microsoft Windows or whatever. You always go with the simplest explanation. So if your product fails and you think it's the economy, it's the marketing, it's, you know, it's these factors I cannot control, it's the pandemic, it's whatever, God's will, you always go with the simplest explanation, which is, I failed because my product sucked.
Yes. That's true. But yet I love how in your book you also talk about Viagra. That was supposed to be the treatment of angina and high blood pressure.
You brought this up, not me.
Yeah, I know. Shiitake mushrooms, rough rabbits, and angina. I mean, and Viagra. But that's what they created it for, right? And it turns out to be a great treatment for erectile dysfunction, which is a new term on a ministry podcast. And bubble wrap. Was textured wallpaper. It turned out to be great protective packaging. And duct tape was supposed to be waterproofing.
And you know what?
And
xylocaine was originally invented for physicians to use as a painkiller, but physicians didn't switch, so it became something for dentists.
Interesting.
I mean, there's going back to an example we already discussed. We thought Macintosh would be spreadsheet database and processor. It came out to be for page making and desktop publishing, right?
That's right.
I think another lesson from that is, and it's something we do very well in Silicon Valley, which is do not be proud.
Yep.
Do not be proud. If if you're trying to say, no, I only want Macintosh to be sold for spreadsheet database and word processing, I don't want it to be a desktop publishing machine, you are an idiot. Do not be proud. Take the win and declare victory. And you can even say, yeah, we had a strategic direction to go into desktop publishing. We knew that was a huge industry and people were tired of using professional layout programs and having to write all kinds of code to lay out their newspapers and books. And then we thought, so many other people wanted to publish documents and make beautiful things. So we focused on the strategic market called desktop publishing because we're so smart and we're so powerful. Well, that is a crock of shiitake because we had no idea. But Apple, like many Silicon Valley companies, we're very good at declaring victory and saying, of course we went into desktop publishing. We foresaw the potential for that market. We knew that.
Yeah, and we were going to buy Pixar. We knew that. we knew we'd do iPods and AirPods and all that. So let's go into grace because I liked how you, in the latter part of your book, you're growing towards what is today's measure of success, according to Guy. And it wasn't about making tons of money or having 10 Ferraris. You were defining success or fruitfulness in a new way. How did you define it?
I define it as making the world a better place. And, I think Steve Jobs, in his own way, made the world a better place by making people more creative and productive with digital devices. Jane Goodall has made the world a better place, if nothing else, for chimpanzees, but for all wildlife, right? Margaret Atwood writes The Handmaid's Tale and, explains to people what dystopia and fascism could be. And all these people... But I want to make one point very clear. I'm not saying that to be remarkable, you need to be Jane Goodall or Steve Jobs. You can be remarkable. You could have a small community church in Nanakuli with an entire, population served of 25 people. You could be remarkable. You could be a high school coach at, God help you, Punahou. You could be, fixing the Kalihi stream. You could be cleaning Kaka'ako. I mean, you don't need to be Steve Jobs or Jane Goodall to be a great, great, remarkable person.
Amen on that. Now, interesting, you quote the Dalai Lama in your book, which he walked by me in a hallway and I shook his hand. I hate to name drop. I just want to let you know that, guy. His hand was so soft. It was softer than Charmin. It was incredibly soft. Maybe because
he probably doesn't do a lot of weeding or
or lifting heavy things. But the quote you had there is graceful leadership is about leading by example and showing others how to live with kindness, compassion, and empathy. Now, let me ask this. You mentioned Steve Jobs. He has a product that helps the world, right? Think and everything. But I would say personally, I'm not sure that's Steve Jobs. I mean, I read the Walter Isaacson book, right? He was a jerk in many ways. I personally happen to know his personal assistant back in the 80s. And it was hard. I mean, if you read the book, he had to have a white grand piano in his hotel room all the time. And once they had a black one, he said, get it out, get a white one. I mean,
and he didn't even play the piano, I bet.
Yeah. So it's not all people who do good. I mean, there's a personal side of them that they do need to work, as you say. The final stage of being remarkable is poise, kindness, and thoughtfulness. Right?
Yes, and
do both and not either or.
I don't think there are too many people who would say Steve Jobs was gracious, to tell you the truth. Okay.
Just want to speak the truth on this podcast.
That's why it's easier to write the book than actually implement what the book says. That's lesson number 5 from this podcast. But and I will kind of explain that, but we're gonna have to degrade, and I will use the word orifice. Okay, so there are fundamentally 2 kinds of orifices. One orifice, it's always about himself or herself. It's my church. It's my company. It's my not-for-profit, and it exists for the glorification of me, right? Egocentric completely. And then there's the mission-driven orifice. And the mission-driven orifice is driven by a mission to make the world a better place. Steve Jobs wanted to make the greatest computer. That was his mission. So if you got in the way of that mission, he ran you over. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be an orifice to be successful. But I'm telling you, if you are a mission-driven orifice, I think you should be given a break. Now, but again, now you do not have to be an orifice. People need to separate correlation from causation. And I think many people read about Steve Jobs and say, oh, he was an orifice and look how successful he was. So I'm going to be an orifice too, and I'll be successful like Steve Jobs. Well, let me tell you something. The easy part is being the orifice. The hard part is getting the vision and making the great products. So I would say that Melanie Perkins, the CEO of Canva, is a great example that you do not need to be an orifice to be successful. The key element is mission driven.
That's great. I think that should be an appendix or something. Add that in. It can be both and, right? You can say I'm sorry and be a great CEO. You don't have to roll them over.
Well, I mean, I have often thought, like, imagine if Steve Jobs were more gracious, how much more he might have accomplished, although he accomplished so much. I'll give you another negative example, though. 5 years ago, if you were to ask me, who's the closest thing to Steve Jobs that's living today? Who has made remarkable inventions and contributions to society? I would have said Elon Musk. I would have said he single-handedly brought electrification to cars. He's bringing satellite internet access where you cannot get a cable, right? So you could have internet access anywhere in the wilderness because someplace there's a satellite flying over you. You can get internet access. And he's boring tunnels under busy streets, and he's going to Mars, and he's inventing solar panels, and he's making recyclable spaceships. Like, arguably, he's made more innovation than Steve Jobs, right? But I tell you something, Elon Musk is a total, absolute failure in grace and graciousness. And I feel bad about that because I wish he had the total package of, doing such great stuff, but then entering the third phase of life and being gracious and graceful. And there's a great Yiddish word, mensch, M-E-N-S-C-H. I think that, think of the difference between Jimmy Carter and Elon Musk. I mean, that's a juxtaposition, right? And, maybe Jimmy Carter wasn't such a great president, but he became more and more gracious and more mensch-like. And Elon Musk, he's just off the rails at this point.
Yeah. And I understand that. And, you know, Steve Jobs, he's did a lot, but I wish he had the philanthropic heart that, you know, Bill Gates says he's going to give half of his money away, or, you know, Bezos gives a lot. I don't know if Steve was that generous with his money after making that. He could have done both and, it seems to me. He could have done both and.
Well, you know, I don't, but there's a part of me that says, listen, if somebody makes a lot of money, it's their business how they want to spend it, right? Who are we to tell people how to spend money?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Of course, the Bible would say harder for, you know, for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to go to heaven.
Well,
money becomes your God, right?
Quite frankly, I think it would be, you know, the camel, the poor camel, it ain't going through any eyes of any needles. I would say, if you look at it, I mean, it's hard for me to point to a billionaire that you would say is graceful and gracious. Oh, Warren Buffett, maybe Warren Buffett.
Yeah. Okay.
And I wish this wasn't true, but, you know, it seems like the wives of billionaires and ex-wives of billionaires show a great deal of graciousness and grace, right? Mm-hmm. The ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, ex-wife of Bill Gates. But what is sad about that? It's almost like, well, they didn't make the money. They just got it in a divorce settlement. But, you know, regardless of how they got the money, at least they're not spending it making mega yachts and, you know, making these, I don't know, temples to worship at. So it's...
You don't need a zillion yachts or a zillion...
You know, at the end of your life, we're all going to die and we're all going to be turned into ashes, and it's worth about 65 cents in chemicals.
Right.
And that doesn't matter who you are.
Right. Of course, I would say Melinda Gates also had a thoughtful heart, especially towards philanthropy, because she was raised in the church. So that's why, which we'll get to. So let's get on to grace. And this is a profound piece in your book, but also a tough piece. When you wrote, you have a choice. You can focus on what divides you, or you can focus on what interests you to share a connection. With a modicum of effort, I guarantee you can find something in common with almost anyone. So, and then you go into Mark Labberton, the former president of Fuller Seminary. In this time of political divide, Guy, I want to hear how you do that. I mean, and you can pick whatever topic you want, but you know,
well,
you can find something in common with almost anyone. And then he has this profound thing about, and we can get to later, you know, not so much why do you believe this, but how did you get to that point in belief? So
Mark,
explore that with us, because this is a time we really need help, right? The country is maybe going to civil war in 30 years or 10 years or something.
Well, Mark Labberton really opened my eyes, because when I was interviewing him, I said, you know, Mark, like, I just cannot wrap my head around the attitude of evangelical Christians who are saying that, you know, Donald Trump is our hero, this womanizer, rapist, convicted criminal. He's our hero. He's our man to make America and the world great again. Mark, I cannot wrap my mind around that. Help me, Mark. And Mark said, you know, Guy, you should not ask people what they believe or why they believe. No, you know, what do you believe about Donald Trump? Why do you believe he's our savior? You should ask people, how did you come to believe that he is our savior? And by having that is a much more open-ended question that can lead to a discussion that you might find something that you share in common, and it will cause you to just judge the other person a lot less negatively. And I truly do believe that. Now, let me give you a real tangible example of that. So let's say that you meet someone who is totally anti-vaccination, right? Just doesn't believe in vaccination. In fact, believes that vaccination is, speaking of Bill Gates, is a way of getting a chip from Bill Gates into your body so Bill Gates can track you. And, you know, vaccination kills people. I have a friend who has a friend who has a friend who said they got MMR and autism and then died. And so I'm totally against vaccination. But then you ask the person, well, how did you personally come to this anti-vax attitude? And maybe this person says to you, well, my grandfather was in the U.S. Army. And the U.S. Army conducted some experiments with vaccination and, diseases. And they didn't even tell the soldiers that they were a test case for vaccination. They just vaccinated them. And my grandfather died because of that experiment. And so now I just do not trust the medical establishment when they tell me to get vaccinated. Now, when you hear a story like that, you have got to say, I can understand why you might have that attitude. And I think that is, very important. So maybe if you're, how did you become such a anti-liberal attitudes? Well, I came back from Vietnam and I risked my life. I lost my leg in Vietnam and America did nothing for me. They didn't care about me. The Veterans Administration Hospital had 2-year waiting period for treatment, whatever. So I'm just really upset with the government, and at that part it was Democrats in power. So, that's why I'm a Republican. It's kind of a reasonable conclusion. So that's why it's important to ask, how did you come to this?
That's very, very good. And of course, after you ask the first question, we have to learn to listen to the answer rather than not in 30 seconds go, what?
Funny you mention, I interviewed a UCSB professor today. Her name is Tanya Israel, and she's all about, crossing the divide. And she said, fact number one, guys, you should understand that there's these extreme right, extreme left, but the vast number of people are in this majority in the middle, and they're just tired of the fighting and the bickering, and they resent all the politics and all the posturing and all that. But if you really ask most people, I bet you if you were able to get into a, calm discussion with most people, whether you're in Alabama or whether you're in Beverly Hills, most people are just, they want to do something productive with their life. They want to leave a better earth than they got. And they want your kids to have a happy life, right? I mean, I bet you that's true in Alabama or California, whether you're Gavin Newsom's neighbor or you're, I can't remember her name. Who's the governor of Alabama? I blocked her name out of my mind.
Gee, I don't even know the name.
And so when you actually talk to these people, you probably share a lot of commonality. And I think that is a very important concept.
Wow, and that's something we really have to work on today. Now more than ever.
We all do,
yeah.
Yes.
And so, it made me think, and I don't know if you're going to agree with this or not, Guy, to kind of close this off. If there was another G with your 3 Gs, right? And we talked about growth and grit and grace.
Well, Dan, first of all, I want to point out to you.
Go ahead.
I want to point out to you that Guy loves tricolons, right? Growth, grit, and grace.
Right,
I came,
right.
I saw, I conquered.
Okay.
So Guy loves the rules of 3. That's
Yes.
number 1.
Yes.
Number 2, Guy loves alliteration. Growth, grit, and grace.
Yes.
And Guy loves alliteration so much, he has 2-letter alliteration. Not just G, but GR. So now, if we stick with the tricolon, and I have a future version of this book when I, close to death,
Yes.
I think the book would be Growth, Grit, and Grave.
So you knew where I was going for the 4th G, right? That isn't there a God element? We'll make it great God to get a GR in there, because
I kid you not. I kid you not. I use ChatGPT.
Okay.
I use ChatGPT. I said, find me words that begin with GR that are nouns that are 1 syllable.
Okay.
And it And that's how I found it. I mean, yeah, yes, I could have gone through a dictionary,
There's
but
an ad for AI, everybody.
ChatGPT
There you
spits
go.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
but I
You
was,
want to get really weird, Dan. You really want to get weird. You want to get like so weird, people going to stop listening to your podcast.
No, I would just say, backing up a bit, in terms of grace, a lot of people have done great things that you've listed in the book, but whether it's Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, there is a lot of God grace. They're born in the right country. Bill Gates was born in a city. They happened to have a high school that had computers. He was fortunate to go to a college called Harvard. His father, I think, was an attorney, so a wealthy, affluent background. So there's some givens there that I would call God's grace. That
I call it dumb shiitake luck, but yeah, okay.
Jeez. Okay, but maybe, I don't know if there are enough dots in the graph, but you could make a case that Jonathan Ivey, who's a designer of Apple stuff, allegedly is a follower of Christ, and what's his name, Rob Johnson, who opened up the Apple stores, is a follower of Christ, goes to the same church you and I used to go to, and maybe there's a God element, like, Jonathan Ivey said, oh man, what should this Macintosh look like? And like God inserts a thought. So, and you might call it luck, or, he's making a drawing. And anyway, it would just seem to me, perhaps, maybe someday in your next book, there could be a fourth G, but the GR thing is throwing me right now.
So grave doesn't do it for you.
No, it's too dead. And if you're into threes, so you're into grave, so that's the four horsemen of the apocalypse or something. But anyway, it's and I love you kind of end with someone say one should be curious and solve problems and do good. I think that's Stacey Abrams, and I know some Republicans out there may not like her, but it's a good thought that we should all be curious, we should all solve problems, and we all should do good. And,
may I listen? That was one of the luckiest moments in writing this book because I have growth, grit, and grace, and Stacey Abrams says about you should be curious, you should solve problems, and so her three things absolutely lined up with my three things. I wish I could tell you I was smart enough to plan that, but that was either God's grace or dumb shiitake luck.
That's clearly God's
grace.
We're
not going to have time for me to get clearly really weird on you, right? I mean,
okay.
Is there a limit to your podcast time? Or
no,
what?
we're ending right now. So anyway, hey, Guy.
Oh, man, I had another great thing to tell you that would make your listeners' heads explode.
Okay, go ahead. One more thing. Hit it.
Okay, so we might end the podcast here, okay? You're Mr. Producer, but if Dan has the fortitude to include the next section.
Oh, geez.
I had this really strange discussion with Mark Laberton, and I thought he was going to just tell me to seek psychiatric care because I said, Mark, I think that AI is God because God is omniscient, omnipotent, and eternal. And so is AI. AI is moving in that direction. And I think that mortal man has just blown it for so long that the only thing that might save society and the world is artificial intelligence. And now, so how do I put those two things together? And my theory is that God is up there and she's saying to herself, I blew it. I blew it with these humans. I gave them free will. I gave them the ability to make their own decisions. And look what they're doing. They're all killing each other. They're ruining the earth. They're polluting. All this stuff is happening. I blew it because I gave them free will. And now they are so arrogant that they no longer believe in my gospel and my concepts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send down AI and I'm going to let those humans believe that they created AI. But really, AI is me, but I'm going to let them think they created it, and this is going to save the world. That's my theory. And to my utter surprise, Mark Laberton said, Guy, that's not too crazy.
Oh, brother. Here we go. More texts and emails. But, yeah, I think that's pretty crazy, Guy. Thank you for, ending the podcast on this controversial note that, for some, AI may be the tree of knowledge.
Mark, I want you to know that, not Mark, Dan. So Dan, someday if it becomes true and AI becomes God or God becomes AI or people realize they're one and the same, you can say that you heard it on your podcast in 2024.
Yep, they'll refer to that heretic in 2024.
Or you can
Guy
just cut
Kawasaki.
this part out. I don't care.
Who knows? I'll talk to the producer later. But it's oh gee. As I said,
your producer's not
remember,
texting you saying, Dan.
Yeah. See, the problem is, remember, God creates Adam, right? So you're saying humans create AI, but and
No,
it
God
could be,
created AI and let humans think that they did it.
Okay. Oh man, it could be the tree of knowledge and gets in the wrong hands, and and Putin and North Korea and China all use it against us. Well, there you have it. I hope you think this is a remarkable podcast after having this person go crazy on me. And if you do want to subscribe or donate to it, because these things need funding, you can go to himonline.org. Guy, thank you so much. God bless.
All right. Mahalo and aloha.
Yes, mahalo and aloha. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.